Beauty is known to be in the eye of the beholder, but different time periods and trends also have a significant influence on what we find attractive. From today's point of view, some things that were the latest fashionable craze in the past are just hilarious. Also, the 10 weird beauty trends that we're going to share with you in today's video just leave us with raised eyebrows these days. Expect drastic body deformations, painted on clothes, and nails that some of us could only dream of. Before we get into it, be sure to hit the like button and ring the notification bell for more videos. Also, stay tuned until the end to hear about one of the craziest fads that most of us have forgotten about. A tiny smile. The Renaissance represented one thing above all: a profound cultural upheaval. This is how this epoch, whose core period dates back to the 15th and 16th centuries, describes the transition from the Middle Ages to modern times. During this exciting time, numerous cultural achievements from antiquity were revived. Above all, the prevailing image of man, literature, architecture, and art went through a drastic change. As you can probably already imagine, the beauty trends were no exception to this cultural upheaval. The Renaissance dream woman therefore had broad hips, a narrow waist, long legs, and teeth as small as possible. Some women even went so far as to file their teeth smaller to conform to the popular image of beauty. Because back then it was true, the smaller the teeth, the more beautiful the woman appeared. We don't know for sure why small teeth were found attractive, but many theories have been proposed over the years. These days, most people find tiny teeth to be a bit odd and off-putting. However, back then, they were all the rage. Long necks. Even today, many Padang women maintain a tradition that's extremely unusual from our Western point of view. From childhood on, they wear a massive necklace which deforms the shoulders and lengthens the neck substantially. What originally prompted the female members of this ethnic group from Myanmar to introduce this ideal of beauty is uncertain today. One theory is that neck coils came about to provide effective protection against a deadly neck bite from a tiger. However, the Padang say this is nothing but a myth. What is certain is that this custom has existed for 1,000 years. The jewelry may have been introduced to commemorate the mythical dragon mother of the Padang women. Another explanation, however, sees the shimmering neck spirals as a protective measure against the kidnapping of women that was common in the past. Since the victims could be seen from afar and thus possibly saved, they became uninteresting for robbers. The truth is, we may never know for sure just why these strange practices became so popular. However, one thing is for sure, it doesn't seem that the locals have any plans of discontinuing this bizarre practice anytime soon. Many of us may remember flipping through a National Geographic magazine as a child and seeing people who wore these neck-extending necklaces. Back then, it was such a strange sight to behold, and these days it's no different. What's truly disturbing about this practice is that it's very, very bad for the bones and muscles in your neck. However, the locals insist on following this trend anyway. Everyone has a right to do whatever they want to their own body, even if it does mean causing serious amounts of pain for the sake of beauty trends. Fake veins. These days, a healthy tan is considered attractive. A brownish skin tone is a sign of health and vitality. However, if we turn back the wheel of time by a few centuries, there was nothing more desirable than a noble pallor, especially for the better-off members of society, because only the poor farmers toiled constantly under the burning sun. However, where your own skin tone didn't match current beauty standards, you had to do something to help. So it happened that many aristocratic women resorted to white powder to create the desired look. The problem, the powdered skin just didn't look natural. So what did the people do? That's right, they painted on bluish veins to imitate translucent skin. If you were to see someone with such a pale complexion these days, you may be worried about them and ask if they wanted to go outside for a bit to soak in the sunlight. However, back then, there was nothing more desirable than a man or woman who had perfectly pale skin. The look made the individual appear far more wealthy than they may have truly been. After all, as mentioned, only farmers stood out in the sun all day. If you had enough money to go around, you didn't have any need to tend to the crops, so you likely stayed indoors out of the heat. This would in turn result in a noticeably paler skin. Claws as a status symbol. If we were to take a look back into the world of ancient China, chances are we'd be taken aback by the clothes they wore. However, their clothes weren't the only thing that were quite unusual and shocking. Their fingernails were quite interesting as well. Back then, anyone who grew fingernails as long as possible represented their own social status and wealth in this way. The background is that those who had to do heavy work every day were simply not able to grow nails that long because they would regularly break off or be a major obstacle. At that time, it was not uncommon in the elite circles to see people whose nails were between 10 and 25 centimeters long. So that the status symbols didn't break off, people wore special nail protectors made of pure gold. However, this unusual trend came with a big catch. It made many things in everyday life extremely complicated. For this reason, the aristocrats had numerous servants who literally helped them with the necessary tasks of everyday life. Opening a simple bottle of your favorite beverage would be nearly impossible. Worse yet, cooking over a stove came with an entirely new set of dangers. After all, you can't get your fingernails too close to the fire or they may burn. Though, admittedly, anyone who had nails this long likely didn't prepare their own food in the first place. Skull manipulation. Given the unusually shaped skulls that are consistently found in Central America, one might think they would be the remains of extraterrestrial visitors. However, the truth is that the corresponding bone finds are the result of artificial skull deformations. This practice of physical manipulation was prevalent among the Maya, Inca, and Aztec ranks, and is still practiced by some indigenous peoples of Latin America today. Compression bandages were primarily used to bring the head into the desired shape, but special boards were also used for this purpose. Skull openings, so-called trepanations, were also part of everyday cultural life at the time. The background to the skull manipulations could not be finally clarified. One theory is that the deformity of the head indicated lifelong membership of a particular tribe. Foot binding. This topic shows how far people are willing to go to conform to a common image of beauty. In detail, this form of body modification pursued the goal of keeping women's feet as small as possible. Ideally, they should not be longer than 10 centimeters. Practiced in China up until the 20th century, little girls' foot bones were broken and then tied off. In this way, the feet were irrevocably deformed. The women were then allowed to slip into special handmade silk shoes that represented their beauty and at the same time changed their gait. In reality, however, the binding of the feet was accompanied by serious damage to health and extreme restrictions, which meant that those affected were usually only able to walk with massive pain. You'd think that, as the years passed by, this pain would subside. However, that wouldn't be the case. For the rest of their lives, these women were forced to walk with severe amounts of pain. There was no treatment or relief from the pain either. They were simply forced to live with it or be looked down upon. Foot binding is still practiced in some parts of the world, but is thankfully becoming more and more scarce. High forehead. What many men around the world are afraid of today embodies a desirable ideal of beauty in the women's world of the early Renaissance, a high forehead. However, since not all women of power and wealth were blessed with a particularly high hairline, a peculiar trend quickly developed. At the time, it was common practice to shave off the excess hair on the forehead or to pull it out by the roots. Then the hair was either draped in elaborate updos or hidden under pointed hoods, so-called hennins. Even the hairstyle trend for men at the time would hardly make it into a fashion magazine today. They wore a haircut that we would now call a bowl cut. Painted tights. Some fashion trends are born out of necessity. During the Second World War, it was practically impossible to get nylon stockings in many countries around the world. The background is, as a material important for war, such as for parachutes or uniforms, nylon was reserved for the armaments industry. So, what did the women who still didn't want to do without the trendy pantyhose look like? They simply painted the characteristic seams on their legs. We also realized how popular nylon tights really were back then when we consider that this item of clothing in post-war Germany was almost like its own currency. Prince Albert piercing. Piercings are still an integral part of the fashion world. But did you know that even Prince Albert, husband of British Queen Victoria, was pierced? However, the German prince, who lived between 1819 and 1861, wore no ear studs or a ring on his nose, but a very special piece of intimate jewelry. In detail, the corresponding piercing was at the tip of the noble genitals. Why Prince Albert got himself pierced in this way is still a matter of debate today. One explanation states that the ring held back the foreskin and was for hygienic purposes. Another theory is that Prince Albert felt disturbed by his best piece when wearing tight breeches. The piercing, which is said to have been attached to the trouser button, is said to have helped. This is truly one of the more disturbing and off-putting stories from British history, but it's a true story that needs to be shared from time to time. Whatever the reason behind this strange piercing may have been, the world may never know, and that might be a good thing. Corsets. Admittedly, corsets are nothing unusual in the current fashion world. However, today's rigid slips are not comparable to their counterparts of the past. Appearing in the first half of the 16th century, corsets were often laced so tightly that the wearer had a proverbial wasp waist. However, this was not only an extremely unnatural trend, but also an extremely dangerous one. The tightly strapped clothing could deform the bone structure, compress the internal organs, restrict the musculature, and permanently damage the spine. Although people in the 18th and 19th centuries were also aware of these risks, they had no significant impact on the fashion world. At that time, it was common for girls to get their first corset at the age of 12. In some cases, even small children were squeezed into the stiff bodices. A Paris newspaper article from 1859 shows how dangerous this fashion trend really was. At that time, a family wanted to know what had caused the sudden death of their 23-year-old daughter. According to the report, the autopsy carried out revealed that the corset compressed the young woman's ribs in such a way that they fractured and pierced through the liver. These days, while corsets or girdles are still popular, they're worn far less frequently, at least in most cases. Back then, it would be unusual for someone to even leave their home without wearing one, though these days, they're often reserved for special occasions or specific dress requirements. Though many corsets that have been created in recent years also have a bit of slack to them so that you can still breathe and move without risking any damage to your body. Still, it may be a bit unwise to wear them for any extended period of time or for multiple days in a row. Back then, your appearance and first impression meant everything. These days, that isn't really the case anymore. Thankfully, as time marches on, we're becoming less and less reliant on beauty. Alright folks, that's all for now. Which feature beauty trend did you find the most disturbing? Do you know of other fads from the past that would be unthinkable today? Let us know your thoughts, suggestions, and feedback on today's video in the comments below to let us know that you enjoyed our foray into the world of weird beauty trends. Give us a thumbs up. Also, while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell to stay up to date from now on. Interested in more interesting posts about the strangest trends in history? Then take a look at the other videos of our channel, which we've linked for you here in the credits. Thank you for watching, have a good one, and see you next time.